Joseph Whitfield just lost $29,227, not to a scam, not to the market, to two federal agencies that never once picked up the phone to tell him he was overpaying. He's 68, 41 years working in Columbus, Ohio, retired last year, which means every dollar he has now is fixed. It doesn't grow. There's no next paycheck to make up for a bad month, and for the last several years, $121.78 has been quietly pulled out of that fixed income every single month. Money that was supposed to stretch across a retirement that could last 20, 25 years. Not fun, a mistake nobody bothered to correct. $81.20 of it is a Medicare surcharge, calculated off income he made 2 years ago, income he hasn't earned since he retired. The other $40.58 is a penalty for enrolling in Medicare 2 years late because a Medicare representative told him incorrectly that he didn't need to yet. $29,000 is a lot of groceries, a lot of prescriptions, a lot of a life he already worked 41 years for. 3 phone calls fixed it. 3. Most people retiring this year will never make a single one. If your Social Security check has looked exactly the same for years, you assume that meant it was right. If your Medicare bill went up and you just paid it, you assumed that meant it was final. Neither one of those is true. Social Security and Medicare don't check your file. They run it. Whatever number is already sitting there, an old earnings year, a tax return from 2 years ago, an enrollment date from a decade back, that's what gets billed month after month on autopilot. Nobody at either agency is assigned to look at your account and ask, does this still add up? Nobody flags a number that's wrong in your favor, and nobody flags a number that's wrong against you either, unless you're the one who calls. That's not a conspiracy. Nobody at SSA sat down and decided to keep Joseph's money. It's simpler than that, and in some ways worse. It's just silence. A system built to run on the last number it was given forever until a person picks up the phone and gives it a new one. Quick and honest before we go further. This is for education, not personal financial or legal advice. Your exact numbers deserve a professional who's actually looking at your file. The first call fixes a number that's been wrong since before Joseph ever retired. If you ever had a job that paid you under the table for a stretch, switched employers in the middle of a year, or had your Social Security number get fixed on a form somewhere along the way, this is you. Every dollar you were ever paid on the books is supposed to be sitting in your earnings record at the Social Security Administration. That record is what decides your check, not your salary, not what you think you earned. The record are, and only the highest earning 35 years in it. Here's what that means in practice. Say Joseph worked a factory job in his 30s where his employer for one single year reported his wages wrong, too low, a clerical mistake nobody caught. That one bad year sat in Joseph's top 35 for over 3 decades, quietly dragging his average down every single time Social Security recalculated his benefit. A correction on that 1 year alone can raise a monthly check by real money, $60, $80, over $100, depending on how far off the number was and where in the top 35 it lands. Multiply that by 12 months, then by however many years are left in retirement, and one wrong entry from 1990, something is still costing Joseph today. You'd think a check that stayed steady for years means the record behind it has always been right. It doesn't mean that. It means nobody's checked it. The form is SSA 7008, Request for Correction of Earnings Record. You can request it directly from Social Security and they'll pull your full wage history year by year so you can see exactly what's on file. Processing typically runs somewhere between 10 and 90 days, depending on how far back the correction reaches and how much documentation exists on your side. Old pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns, anything that proves what you actually earned that year. The more paper you can hand them, the faster it moves. There's no fee to request it and no penalty if the review comes back clean. The only cost is doing nothing because there's a clock. Corrections generally have to be filed within 3 years. 3 months, and 15 days of the wage year in question. After that window closes, the record is locked permanently, with only narrow exceptions for fraud or a clear clerical error. Every year that passes without a check is a year that becomes unfixable. Have you ever actually pulled your full earnings statement from SSA.gov and read it line by line? Comment yes or no, because most people watching this never have. If you retired in the last 2 years, had your hours cut, lost a spouse, or watched pension income disappear, your Medicare bill may still be charging you like none of that ever happened. Here's the mechanism, and it's the one almost nobody questions because it sounds official. Your Medicare Part B premium isn't based on what you make now. It's based on your tax return from 2 years ago. Joseph's bill right now reflects what he earned 2 years back, while he was still working full-time. He retired last year. Medicare doesn't know that yet, and it won't find out on its own. That gap is called IRMAA, the income-related monthly adjustment amount, and depending on the bracket your old income lands in, it adds anywhere from $81.20 to $487 a month on top of the standard Part B premium of $202.90. At the low end, that's over $970 a year. At the high end, it's close to $5,844 a year for income you're not even earning anymore. Most people assume this is just the rule, and rules aren't something you appeal. That assumption is wrong, and it's expensive. There's a form SSA 44 built specifically for this. It lets you report a qualifying life event, retirement, a reduction in work hours, the death of a spouse, divorce, a lost pension, or the loss of income-producing property. File it, and Social Security recalculates your premium off your actual current income instead of the old tax return. And if you were overcharged in the meantime, that overpayment can come back to you. Here's what that actually looks like in dollars. Say Joseph retired in March, but didn't file SSA 44 until September, 6 months later. Every one of those 6 months, he paid the surcharge based on his old working income, $81.20 times 6. That's $487.20 he was overcharged before he ever picked up the phone. Once SSA 44 is filed and approved, that overpayment doesn't just stop going forward, it can be refunded back to him. But it only gets refunded if he files. The agency isn't going to calculate what it owes him and mail a check unprompted. Filing it isn't complicated, but it does need paperwork behind it, something that documents the life event itself. A retirement letter from an employer, a pension termination notice, a death certificate if that's the event. Social Security wants proof the change actually happened, not just a phone call saying it did. Once that documentation is in, the recalculation is based on your estimate of this year's income, not last year's tax return. And it gets reviewed again the following year when your actual return catches up. You thought IRMAA was just the rule. It's not a rule for you anymore. It's a rule for income you don't have. That's 2 calls down. The third one is the one almost nobody wins. And before you make it, you need to know exactly why the odds are different. Ask most people why they've never appealed a Medicare surcharge, and you'll hear the same answer. It's the government. It's a federal number. What's the point? That assumption is exactly why the form barely gets used. SSA 44 isn't hidden. It isn't a secret. It's sitting right there on Social Security's own website, a real legal right tied to a documented life event. And most retirees never file it, not because they're not eligible, but because they never believed appealing was even an option. Think about how strange that is for a second. People will spend an afternoon comparing grocery prices to save $4 dearer and never once pick up the phone to challenge a bill that's overcharging them by $80, $200, $400 a month. Not because the form is hard, because nobody told them it existed. That's the flip. It's not a workaround. It's not a loophole somebody found. It's a form the agency built on purpose for exactly this situation, and it sits mostly unused because people assumed asking wouldn't work. Did your income drop in the last 2 years and you never told Social Security? Say so in the comments, because if it did, you may already qualify for money back. If a Medicare or Social Security representative, not an old employer, not a coworker, an actual federal Rep E, ever told you that you didn't need to enroll yet, this one is you. Years before he retired, while Joseph was still working past 65 without the kind of employer coverage that lets you delay Medicare safely, he called to ask if he needed to sign up. A representative told him no, not yet, not while he was still working. That was wrong. Joseph believed it and enrolled 2 years later than he should have. The penalty for that is permanent. 10% of the standard Part B premium added for every full 12 months you were late for the rest of your life. 2 years late is $40.58 extra every month at this year's rates, $9,739 over a 20-year retirement. 5 years late is $101.45 a month, $24,348 over that same 20 years. It doesn't reset. It doesn't shrink. It's not a one-time fee. It's a surcharge for life, unless somebody successfully challenges it. And here's where I have to be straight with you, because the first 2 calls were close to automatic once you ask correctly. This one isn't. The relief that can remove this penalty is called equitable relief, and it only applies if the bad information came from a federal employee, Social Security, Medicare, or an official Medicare contractor, not an employer's HR department, not a coworker who meant well, a federal rep specifically. There's no formal appeals process for it, no guaranteed timeline for a response, and by every account, approvals are uncommon. That doesn't mean don't call. It means call, document everything you can, the date, who you spoke with, what they told you, if you have it in writing, and go in knowing this is the one call that might not work. The first 2 calls are close to a sure thing. This one is worth trying anyway. There's no dedicated form for equitable relief the way there is for the other 2 calls. You request it by contacting Social Security directly and asking specifically for an equitable relief review of your Part B late enrollment penalty, tied to the misinformation you received. Bring whatever proof exists, notes from the call if you kept any, a name or date you remember, anything in writing from Medicare or Social Security from that period. The stronger the documentation, the better the odds. But even a well-documented case isn't a guarantee, because there's no formal review board and no set response window. Some people get the penalty reduced. Some get it removed completely. Some don't hear back for months and get a no. All 3 outcomes are real, and none of them are shameful. The only guaranteed loss is not asking at all. Here's the plan put together. 2 of these calls are close to automatic once you ask correctly. One of them is a genuine long shot worth trying anyway. Knowing which is which before you pick up the phone is what separates someone who gets money back from someone who gives up after one hard conversation. The earnings record correction has a hard deadline, 3 years, 3 months, 15 days from the wage year in question. If you're anywhere close to that window on an old error, that call goes first before anything else because it's the one that can close permanently while you wait. The IRMAA correction through SSA 44 has no deadline, but every month you wait is a month of overcharge that's harder to claim back and a refund window that keeps shrinking behind you. That call goes next, especially if you've had any life change in the last 2 years you haven't reported. The equitable relief request for the Part B penalty has no deadline either, but it also compounds for life the longer it runs. So there's no real advantage to waiting. Make that call too. Just walk in understanding the odds, not expecting a guarantee. None of these require a lawyer. None of them cost anything to ask. They require exactly one thing, the phone call itself, and knowing the right words to say when someone at the other end tries to move you along. 3 calls. Here's exactly how to make them. Call 1 Social Security at 1-800-772-1213. Ask specifically for Form SSA 7008, Request for Correction of Earnings Record. Say this: I'd like to request a review of my full earnings record, OP. I believe there may be an error in a past wage year. Gather anything that proves what you actually earned. Old W-2s, pay stubs, tax returns, place you before you file, so the review moves faster. Call 2, same number, ask specifically for Form SSA 44 and name your qualifying life event out loud. Retirement, reduced hours, a spouse's death, divorce, a lost pension. Say this: I need to file an SSA 44 to report a life-changing event that affects my Medicare premium. Have documentation of the event ready, a retirement letter, a termination notice, whatever proves it happened, and ask directly whether any of your prior months are eligible for a refund. Call 3, same number, different ask. Say this: I'd like to request an equitable relief review of my Part B late enrollment penalty. I was given incorrect information by a federal representative about when I needed to enroll. Have whatever you remember ready, an approximate date, anything in writing, any detail at all, because vague is better than nothing, but specific is what actually moves a case forward. If a representative tells you they can't help with one of these 3 specific requests, ask to be transferred to someone who handles that request, or ask for a callback from someone who does. Not every rep who answers the national line handles earnings corrections, SSA 44 filings, and equitable relief reviews equally often. Persistence on the same call is normal and expected, not a sign you're doing something wrong. Same phone number, 3 different asks, 3 different forms. Write them down before you dial, because a rep who hears you know exactly what you're requesting treats the call differently than one who hears, I think something might be wrong. $29,227. That's still the number Joseph started with. Not because it's a magic figure, because it's sitting in exactly the same place it was sitting before he made a single call, in an old tax return, in an unfixed earnings year, in a penalty nobody ever challenged. Nothing about that changes on its own. Social Security isn't going to recalculate his benefit unprompted. Medicare isn't going to notice he retired and adjust the bill. And a mistake made by a federal rep years ago doesn't correct itself just because enough time passes. The record is already sitting there waiting to be pulled. The form is already sitting there waiting to be filed. The only thing standing between where Joseph was and where he is now was 3 phone calls he almost didn't make. You don't need a lawyer for this. You don't need a financial advisor for this. You need the number, 1-800-772-1213, and about 20 minutes on 3 separate calls this week before another month of it quietly disappears.